I would hope that you would excuse me at times today if I have to stop and clear my throat and I don't have time to hit the shut off button on the microphone. But that's because we're all ingesting all of this smoke the last few days, and it doesn't look like it's going to. Well, maybe some rain tomorrow night going into Friday morning will clear some of it out, but that depends on where that rain falls. It could be pretty much just pop up storms. I do want to point out we're looking at weather tomorrow, I think, again in the 90s, low 90s, and then we start to moderate with the temperature. And then things will be a little bit cooler, and maybe perhaps that will help with the wildfires, and that will help also back off on some of the smoke that we're all trying to cut through with a knife. And it is far worse in other parts of the state and in other parts of the Northwest. I was reading this morning on the Associated Press wire. One school system in Central Oregon has already delayed the start of school because they don't want the kids out there walking to school in all of this. And the pictures I've seen that are, you can see some of these too. I posted them. Some of my coworkers have done the same. We posted these, though, at various, our website, newsradio1310.com. And what I'm seeing is just unreal. It looks like some of those pictures from Beijing where you can't see anything on a smoky day, and people are walking around with the masks trying to avoid it all. I bring all of this up, though, because I think it raises some questions that I'd like to talk about this morning in relation to something I happened to see on Facebook. This morning I got up about 3 o'clock, started my morning coffee, and sat down to do a little show preparation before I even left the house. And I looked at Facebook. There was a woman I worked with in Syracuse, New York, many, many years ago, back in the 1990s, by the name of Catherine Grace. Really nice lady. Catherine and I actually were neighbors for a while, too, and we used to walk our dogs together in the park. And Catherine was a very devout Roman Catholic. And we used to talk about faith and a lot of those things and how we really were working in a business, a media business that was, well, if not downright evil, wasn't very faithful. And we still stay in touch via social media. She had a post last night where she said, well, here we are. We may be in the middle with what's going on because, let's be honest, we've got these massive hurricanes. We've got earthquakes. Do you know there have been 10 earthquakes already today since about 1 o'clock this morning in southeastern Idaho? The biggest of which was 4.1 on the scale. And there have been over 100 in the last several days. Now, this is well above average. We should point that out. They haven't been too terribly devastating, but we should be taking heed that this is a little abnormal, what's going on out there. So you've got hurricanes, you've got earthquakes, we've got wildfires, we've got choking smoke. Monday night, some of the folks in northern Idaho actually looked up into the sky and saw a streaking fireball. Was one of those big rocks that comes out of the asteroid belt and sometimes comes through the atmosphere. It crashed somewhere in British Columbia, I believe it was. And some people said they even heard a sonic boom, and that may have been the fact that the rock was breaking apart. You got that going on. There is a story today, I saw a link on the Drudge Report about solar flares. The activity could be quite intense in coming days and weeks, much more so than we normally see, and it will cause some havoc here on Earth. Obviously, with the electrical grid. You've got a famine in Africa. Did you know that? One of the worst famines in decades is going on in mainly sub-Saharan Africa, from Nigeria toward the western part of the continent, all the way to the eastern side, the eastern horn of the continent. Terrible famine. And it's one of those underreported stories by Western media because, well, if they gave any attention to that, that would be time they'd have to cut away from beating up on President Trump and Republicans. And they can't do that, obviously. Just not in their narrative. You've got that going on. So I've got a checklist here. Solar flares, hurricanes, famine in Africa, earthquakes. And I've also put down North Korea. Because you see a fireball in the sky, and it may be just simply, meteor. But it could well be the nukes are getting through, and we haven't been able to shoot them all down. So all of these things potentially. Now, in human history, there have been times where we've had the confluence where many things like this have happened, tragedies and disasters and man-made events have all occurred at once. So it's nothing new. On the other hand, the sheer scale of some of these things, the rumblings going on, and then the rumblings coming out of the verbal rumblings, North Korea, make you wonder if perhaps we're near the end. Now, if you're a Protestant, you have perhaps, you put a great deal of stock in the book of Revelation. And the tribulation that some of you expect it would last for several years. That's the prophecy that you're looking at. In Roman Catholicism, there may not be quite such an emphasis on that end times prophecy that you see in Revelation. However, there is something that some Roman Catholics believe is called the Great Chastisement. And I should point out the two previous popes both put a lot of stock in this. The current pope, not so much. He said, look, God wants everyone to be happy and well and maintain hope. Francis gets a lot of criticism from people, even in my own audience. And he some days is liked by media, other days hated by media. I don't think that he's the communist that some people make him out to be. I think what he is he feels he's got the bully pulpit now and that he has to express hope. Because what else do we have? On the other hand, he's trying to downplay this great chastisement. Well, what is that? 100 years ago, this year, 100 years ago, 1917, in Portugal, some peasant children said that they actually they had an encounter with an apparition of Mary, and that the Mother of God spoke to them, and that she gave them a great deal of insight as to what was going to be happening in the world in coming years. Now, one of those children grew up and ended up sharing a lot of this with church leaders, as well as, and I don't think it's published in a best-selling book, but wrote some of it down as well for her own personal record. And there is something that a lot of these people believe that have heard these prophetic words. Some of it foreshadowed World War II. And, of course, this was all in the midst of World War I. But what they say is that the Mother of God told them that man was falling away from God, and obviously God didn't want that, and because of that, God was going to stand back and allow for a great many of these horrible things to happen as the great chastisement. Now, Pope Francis says, no, God doesn't want to harm you, and it's probably true. Your parents don't want to spank you either, but sometimes it happened. I mean, when you were a kid, that's just the nature of the thing. And this is the same God who apparently wiped out the planet with a great flood. So this is not completely far-fetched that these types of things for people of faith are all involved with this. Here are some of the things that she supposedly predicted were on the way. Now, all of these things have happened in spades over the course of the last century, and we may not be quite at that. They were maybe smaller chastisements. War, hunger, persecution of the church, persecution of the Holy Father, the annihilation of nations. Now, according to where you are in media, I've already mentioned the persecution of Pope Francis. Persecution of the church, any church really, is on the ropes today. There's a story out of Colorado that I happened to be looking at this morning at the Daily Signal. A Christian baker who refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding was hauled before some sort of government bureaucrat who claims to be speaking for people's civil rights. And there's an actual quote from the bureaucrat who says that religion has been one of the most harmful things ever devised by man, and it harms people. And this person tried to claim it was even the cause of the Holocaust. I'm not aware that the Nazis were very religious, but this individual with the government of Colorado says that we should just pretty much get rid of freedom of religion from the First Amendment, which is with the liberals say they know what's right and wrong, and they don't need God to tell them that, and they don't need a constitution to tell them that, and that's the direction that we should go. Meanwhile, the baker, his father, fought in World War II and liberated death camps and said, how can they compare me to what the Nazis did? I refuse to bake a cake because of my religious beliefs. I haven't put anybody else in the oven. The only thing I put in the oven are cakes and pies and cupcakes. And yet, you see what's going on here in all of this. And I'm telling you, we are in a situation right now where it may be nothing. It may just be a confluence of bad storms and earthquakes, and maybe the little fat guy in North Korea will never get them off the ground. But it does make you set up and take notice, and it should make you you should always have a healthy fear of what could happen. That's not saying that you need to go live in a cave and hope that it will pass you by. But these predictions of fire from the sky and 3 days of darkness and all of this, right now I could see how some people could put all of this together. And so I wanted to share some of that with you this morning. It's 16 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Cool morning to start the day. It's 52, still on our way into the 90s today, unless the smoke doesn't allow the sun to get through again, which seemed to be the case yesterday. It was very nice walking around outside yesterday until you had to breathe. Telephone number to reach our program, 208-736-0300. And I believe we have a caller joining us now. Caller, you're on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. Thank you for taking my call. I
Sure.
appreciate it very much. You know, really, what you're just got done saying, you're not trying to scare anybody. You're not trying to fool anybody. You're giving people something to think about. That's all it is. I have no doubt in my mind that I'll witness the second coming. I'm Catholic. I live my Catholic religion. You know, with the abortion stuff going on, with the gay marriage stuff going on, this is exactly the opposite of what things are supposed to be. And I'm not being judgmental, so please, people don't call thinking, oh, yeah, he's being some kind of smart aleck. I'm not. But Bill's giving you something to think about. This could very well be it. Who knows? Am I scared of it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. When I was going to school at St. Edward's there in Twin, we knew this was coming eventually. We didn't know we'd see it. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But I'm not scared of it one bit. It's what it's supposed to be. And so just like the liberals and that, listen to what Bill's saying. He's telling you the truth. And I really, really pray that you're listening to him, because you don't need to be scared, but you need to think about it.
Well, again, what I mentioned is you have to have a healthy fear. But if you don't actually believe in judgment or even God, you can't have that fear.
Right. Well, I belong to the Knights of Columbus in Jerome, and I've had people say, what's that all about? What do you guys do? It's kind of secretive. No, it's not a secretive thing. We just, it is what it is. But we're no, there's no voodoo. There's none of that stuff going on. But it amazes me how people will look at religion as some kind of just a talking group, is what they look at. You look at the Pope John Paul II. You had that deal on the other day talking about when they tried to assassinate him. I mean, he was probably one of the greatest men that ever walked the earth, other than maybe Ronald Reagan, and then the LDS president, Hinckley. I'm Catholic. I enjoyed listening to that guy. I enjoyed listening to him.
Yeah.
When he was alive. There again, I'm not going to be closed-minded. Now, they start talking about you have the right to go in the bathroom with little girls. You have the right to abortion. You have the right to the gay marriage crap. No, that's where I'm going to draw my line, because that is going dead set against what I believe. But no, Bill, this is a great subject. I wish people would talk about this more than that little dweeb in North Korea. And, but anyway, you're doing a great job, Bill. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the call. The fact of the matter is we're dealing with a great many people out there. The only thing they fear is the fact that they can't control all the rest of us. And that makes them angry because, well, they claim they're more virtuous and smarter, and they have some sort of moral code, which I don't know what that's based on. I guess it was written by some hippie in the 1960s who had VD and Berry. All right, I've got to take a break. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. We'll talk medicine between 8:30 and 9. We might even deal with some of the smoke, too, some people out there having some terrible times breathing. That's on the way this morning on KLIX. I have great respect for the man who's going to be on the air after this show. He has made this entire industry possible, Rush Limbaugh. Got to share a couple of things. The American left has never liked the fellow because they can't silence him. And that's been the goal for 30-some years. And he really ticked them off yesterday. I'll get to that in just a moment. It's 8:23:52. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Cooler weather is on the way. This heat wave that we've seen in the last week or so obviously might make you think otherwise, but cooler weather is on the way, and it won't be long before, obviously, you need to turn on that furnace. If you haven't tested it to make sure that it's in fine working order, better do that today. If you find you've got an issue, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out. They'll get the job done. They'll get it done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free. Cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number, 208-678-0459. That's 208-678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. The Resurgent has been tracking this. Eric Erickson, who works at The Resurgent, is also the founder of that website and a talk show host himself at WSB in Atlanta, Georgia, has this headline: Everybody freaked out over Rush Limbaugh yesterday, but he was right. A hurricane denier, they're calling him on social media. He said nothing unreasonable, according to Erickson. His overarching point, for those who did not listen, is that when even the computer models were showing that Irma, that's the hurricane currently churning just off Cuba, was going to turn north and go up the eastern seaboard, people were making a run on water in Florida. It was not a casual stocking up of supplies, but a panic. Grocery stores were empty in a short while. This was led by media and advertising designed to induce fear. What disappeared first? Well, the water did. Bottled water disappeared when, right now, the water flows drinkably through the pipes of South Florida residences. Yeah, that tap. All these people are buying bottled water. They're trying to get you to do that so they can get you weaned away from getting it out of the tap and just get some extra money out of you. Rush is right, he says. The media has so invested for so long in the global warming scenario that promised more frequent and bigger hurricanes without ever delivering. They are right now positively orgasmic that a big storm is coming. It is their I told you so moment after 2 decades of telling us and nothing happened. Local TV stations and national networks have ramped up the coverage, and it's not the coverage keeping people informed, but coverage decided to say, I told you so, and you're all going to die. So they're selling you, I said there's a healthy fear. This is the unhealthy fear. They're trying to sell you soap by telling you that the end of the world is near. 825, we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next, and you're on KLIX.
Back in the 1990s, Bill, a book came out called The Next War by Peter Schweitzer. It was co-authored by Caspar Weinberger and Margaret Thatcher, in which they predicted future wars, including Korea. Now, they predicted that North Korea would use heavily biological warfare in any attack with the United States, and the use of refugees. By releasing biological warfare in heavy population centers like Mexico City and other areas, America would be millions and millions of refugees would flood into the United States, fleeing these mass catastrophes going on, and possibly even Canada, Toronto, Vancouver. As soon as these biological attacks occurred, people would just run like sheep.
And you know, you bring that up. Right now, Canada is being overwhelmed because the Prime Minister there opened his mouth, put his foot in his mouth, welcoming all of these refugees. And now they're having issues. They don't know where to put them all. They won't have space this winter. So these people could be out in encampments, freezing to death somewhere in the Yukon, I suppose. But we've already got these problems. And if they can just make that worse, they can cripple us.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, it's the use of refugees in warfare is one of the weapons people don't understand, and it is one of the best weapons, or absolutely the worst weapon there is, because millions and millions of people fleeing has the same devastation effect as a lot of bombs and everything else, because they just overwhelm the system, and people, and you just can't deal with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you much for the call. I never had a chance, by the way, to meet Caspar Weinberger, but his deputy for a while, well, actually he was a deputy under 2 administrations, one a Democrat and one Republican, because he'd worked for Harold Brown as well, Colonel Bud Coyle. I actually used to go out with Bud Coyle's stepdaughter, and she told me that she used to sometimes go into the Pentagon with him, and she got to meet all of these important people who were defending the United States. Bud Coyle actually had been a classmate of John McCain at the Naval Academy. Coming up on 828, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and we're at 53. Didn't get to meet Bud, though, either, because he had died, I think, in 2002, and so I never got that opportunity. I do know a lot of people, though, who knew of him and knew him well, and the stories I heard. I remember her telling me one time, she said, it was an interesting place to grow up in that household. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, when you had to have a dinner guest over, it'd be someone like Buzz Aldrin. Can you imagine having a dinner conversation with Buzz Aldrin? What was it like? He probably gets that question, 50 times a day. I do want to mention some of the things we have coming up in the next hour of the program. First, of course, in the next half hour, Dr. Jonathan Tripp's going to be talking some allergies and breathing issues with us. That's on the way in just a few minutes. 9 o'clock hour today, I'm going to try and share a few more of the conversations we had at the Twin Falls County Fair with some of the our local elected state representatives as well as county commissioners. I'll pass that along coming up in the next hour. Also, if we get a chance, a couple of references to this DACA program for all of the hyperventilating going on among the liberals out there. Give me a break. The program was going to collapse anyway because it was unconstitutional. The president, by turning it around and giving it to Congress, means maybe some of these people can actually stay if they've served in the military and maybe been wounded, or if they are serving in law enforcement, or if they're curing cancer, or they're working on a physics problem. On the other hand, the guy who's out robbing a grocery store, he may have to go. Finally. We'll talk about that coming up in the next hour as well. In the meantime, short break. It's 53, and you're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com.